In the lively town of Makanda, the streets were always filled with the sounds of traders calling out prices, children laughing, and the distant hum of motorbikes passing by. It was a place full of color and energy, where everyone knew each other and stories spread fast. Among the many people who lived there was a young woman named Ebony. She was admired for her beauty and her fine clothes. Her hair was always styled neatly, her dresses were bright and well-pressed, and she carried herself as though the whole town revolved around her. But behind that beauty, there was a touch of pride that everyone noticed even if they never said it aloud. Ebony liked to be seen as important, and she often looked down on those who were poor or from the countryside. One hot afternoon, as the sun burned high in the sky, Ebony sat on her porch drinking cold juice when a tall, lean man appeared at her gate. His clothes were simple, a little dusty from travel, and he carried a small bag on his shoulder. It was her cousin, Kofi, from the village. She had not seen him for many years, not since they were both children playing near the river. Kofi greeted her with a warm smile and said politely, "Cousin Ebony, it is good to see you again. I have come to the city to look for work. I hoped I could stay with you for a while, just until I find a job." Ebony looked him over from head to toe. His sandals were worn and his shirt looked old. She frowned slightly. "You want to stay here?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't usually keep guests for long. My house is not a lodge." Kofi smiled kindly, not offended. "I understand, cousin. I will help with the chores. I just need a place to sleep while I search for work." Ebony thought for a moment. She did not like the idea of sharing her house, but she also did not want the neighbors to think she was heartless. Finally she sighed. "Fine," she said. "You can stay. But you must earn your keep. You will sweep, wash, and cook. I don't want to see you idle." Kofi nodded gratefully. "Thank you, cousin. I will do my best." That night, Ebony slept feeling proud of herself. She told herself she was doing a good thing by letting her poor cousin stay. But in her heart, she saw him as a burden, not as family. The next morning, Kofi woke up early. Before the sun had fully risen, he had already swept the compound, fetched water from the tap, and started boiling water for breakfast. When Ebony came out of her room, still sleepy and wrapped in her fine robe, she was surprised to find everything clean and organized. "You are up early," she said, pretending to sound polite. "Yes, cousin," Kofi replied with a smile. "The early bird gets more done before the sun grows hot." Ebony shrugged. "Well, keep it that way. I like order." From that day, Kofi became like a quiet shadow in the house. He worked without being told, washed the dishes, cleaned the floors, and made sure the compound always looked neat. When guests came, he greeted them with a gentle smile and offered them drinks. Everyone who visited Ebony's house began to notice him. "Who is that young man?" one of her friends asked. "He works so well. Is he your helper?" Ebony laughed loudly. "Oh, that's just my cousin from the village. He needed a place to stay, so I turned him into my house boy," she said proudly. Her friends giggled, impressed by how easily she seemed to command him. Soon, Ebony began giving Kofi more tasks. She made him wash her clothes, polish her shoes, and even run to the market to buy things for her. She would often sit with her friends, watching as Kofi walked by carrying baskets or sweeping the yard. "See how well he listens," she would say with a grin. "In this house, everything runs by my rules." Kofi, however, never argued or showed anger. He worked quietly and faithfully, his calm nature making even the hardest chores seem easy. He never complained when Ebony gave him too much to do. Sometimes she would even call him while he was eating and ask him to fetch her something. He would put down his plate, smile, and do as she said. At first, the neighbors thought it strange that she treated her own cousin this way, but Kofi's gentle attitude made it hard to feel sorry for him. He never looked unhappy, never raised his voice. When asked why he tolerated it, he would simply say, "Work is work, and every act of service teaches patience." Days turned into weeks. One morning, Ebony's neighbor, an old woman named Mama Deka, saw Kofi scrubbing the steps outside the house. "My son," she said kindly, "does your cousin treat you well? You work so much. Do you at least get rest?" Kofi smiled. "She has given me a roof to sleep under, Mama. I am thankful for that." Mama Deka nodded slowly, watching the young man work with steady hands. She murmured, "a thankful heart carries blessings far." That evening, Ebony's friends came over for tea. The table was neatly set, the floor spotless, and the air smelled of sweet bread that Kofi had baked. Her friends were impressed. "You are lucky," one of them said. "Not everyone finds such a hard-working helper." Ebony laughed proudly. "I trained him well," she said, though she had taught him nothing. "He knows his place." While they laughed and talked, Kofi stood quietly in the corner, waiting in case they needed anything. When one of the women accidentally spilled tea, he quickly brought a cloth and cleaned it up without a word. The women noticed his calm face and whispered among themselves. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Ebony looked around her clean house and smiled with satisfaction. Everything was perfect. The dishes were washed, the clothes folded, the floors shining. She felt proud that she had someone to do all this for her. She told herself she was generous for letting Kofi stay, never realizing how much he had lightened her own burdens. But as Kofi lay on his thin mat that night, staring at the ceiling, he thought about his life in the city. He missed home, the smell of rain on the village soil and his mother's laughter. Yet he did not regret coming. He believed every season had its lesson. Maybe, he whispered softly to himself, this is where I learn patience. The moonlight fell gently on his tired face, and though his hands were rough from hard work, there was peace in his heart. Kofi knew something Ebony did not, that kindness, even when unnoticed, never truly goes to waste. And while Ebony slept comfortably in her bed, dreaming of her next outfit or gathering, life was quietly teaching her that pride is a heavy load, and sooner or later, everyone must learn how to put it down. Kofi woke up before the sun every morning. The rooster from the neighbor's yard would crow, and before anyone else had opened their eyes, Kofi was already sweeping the front yard, cleaning the veranda and fetching water from the tap. His movements were quiet, steady and full of care. The people who passed by the house in the early hours often saw him working, a soft smile always on his face as if the hard work brought him peace. When Ebony finally woke up, the house was always spotless. The air smelled fresh, the dishes were washed and breakfast was ready. She would stretch and yawn, walking through her clean home without even a thought of how it got that way. To her, it was only natural that Kofi should do it. Sometimes she didn't even greet him in the morning. She simply gave him more tasks. Kofi, she would say while eating her bread, after you finish washing the clothes, go to the market and buy fish. And make sure you don't bring small ones. I don't like small fish. Yes, cousin, Kofi would reply softly. He would take the little money she gave him, walk to the busy market, and carefully check every stall until he found what she wanted. Even when the sun was hot and his legs ached, he never complained. He would come back home with a smile, showing her the fresh fish he bought. At first, Ebony barely noticed his effort. She was used to giving orders and having things done. But slowly, others began to see what she ignored. The neighbors often watched Kofi as he worked, how he moved calmly, how he greeted everyone kindly, and how he never spoke rudely no matter how tired he looked. One afternoon, the old woman next door, Mama Decca, called him over. My son, she said kindly, can you help me carry these buckets of water? My back is not what it used to be. Kofi smiled. Of course, Mama. He carried the heavy buckets to her kitchen without a word of complaint. When he finished, she gave him a small piece of bread and said, Thank you, my boy. You are a blessing. That became the beginning of something new. Word spread around the neighborhood that Ebony's cousin was a hard-working young man. Soon, people began calling him to help with small tasks, fixing a broken chair, sweeping a yard, washing windows, or carrying goods from the market. Each person gave him a little something in return, a few coins, a loaf of bread, or a warm meal. Kofi never refused anyone who needed help. He believed every act of service was an opportunity to learn and grow. And although the extra work made him even more tired, he always thanked people for trusting him. Ebony found this very amusing. One evening, she saw him coming home with a small bag of yams that someone had given him for helping. She laughed loudly and said, So now you are working for everyone in the street too? Are you planning to open a cleaning business? Kofi chuckled softly. No, cousin. I just help where I can. Well, she said, waving her hand dismissively, at least you're useful for something. Maybe that's your talent. Kofi said nothing. He only smiled and went to prepare dinner. As the days passed, the neighbors grew fond of him. The children loved him because he always greeted them and sometimes helped them make kites from old paper. The elders respected him for his good manners. When he walked through the town, people would call out, Kofi, you are a hard-working man. But not everyone was kind. Some people teased him for doing what they called women's work. They would laugh and say, Look at that man washing clothes and sweeping floors. Doesn't he feel shame? Kofi only smiled. There is no shame in honest work, he would reply. Every clean floor brings peace. Ebony sometimes heard these words but never thought much of them. She was more concerned about how she looked, what clothes to wear, and what her friends said about her. To her, Kofi was still just her poor cousin who should be thankful for a place to stay. One afternoon, when the sun was bright and hot, Ebony invited her friends over for tea. Kofi spent the whole morning preparing. He swept the compound, washed the cups, and baked sweetbread with care. When the guests arrived, the house looked perfect. The women clapped their hands and said, "Ebony, your home is always so beautiful. You must have worked hard." Ebony smiled proudly. "Of course," she said, pretending she had done it all herself. "I keep my house in order." Meanwhile, Kofi stood quietly in the kitchen, listening but saying nothing. He was not hurt, but deep inside he wished she would at least say thank you. Later that day, after the guests had gone, Ebony went to her room to rest. She found that her favorite dress had been washed and ironed. She smiled a little and thought, at least he's good for something. That evening, while Kofi was eating a simple meal of rice, the same old woman, Mama Deka, came by again. She carried a small basket filled with fruits. "My son," she said warmly, "take these. You helped me yesterday and I want to thank you." Kofi's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Mama," he said, taking the basket gently. When she left, Ebony noticed the fruits and frowned. "Why is that old woman always giving you things?" she asked. "She is kind," Kofi said softly. "I help her with small chores." Ebony rolled her eyes. I see. So you're becoming a hero now, is that it?" Kofi smiled. "No, cousin. I'm just doing what I can." Later that night, as the town grew quiet and the moon hung over the rooftops, Kofi sat outside for a moment, enjoying the cool air. He could hear the sound of drums from far away, the laughter of children, and the hum of insects. Life was simple yet beautiful. He had little money, but he felt rich in peace. Inside, Ebony watched him through the window. She wondered how he could be so calm. She had clothes, money, and attention, yet she often felt restless and bored. Kofi had nothing but seemed happier than anyone she knew. Over the next few weeks, things in the neighborhood changed slightly. People began greeting Ebony more politely, not because of her fine clothes but because of Kofi. "We like your cousin," they told her. "He's a good young man. You are lucky to have him." Each time someone said that, Ebony's smile grew tight. She didn't like sharing the attention. To her, it felt strange that a simple man from the village could earn more respect than she did. Still, Kofi kept working quietly. He never noticed her jealousy, or maybe he did and just chose not to care. Every morning, he continued his routine, sweeping, cooking, washing, as though the world's kindness and cruelty were all the same to him. And without realizing it, Ebony's house became known in Makonda as one of the cleanest, most peaceful homes in the street. But it was not because of her. It was because of the man she mocked, the man who never raised his voice, the man whose patience was stronger than her pride. Every bucket of water he carried, every floor he cleaned, every smile he gave to a stranger added a little more light to his name. And slowly, without Ebony noticing, her cousin's quiet humility began to shine brighter than her beauty, and much brighter than her pride ever could. The afternoon sun rested lazily above the roofs of Makonda, painting the streets in golden light. The air was warm and full of chatter from the market nearby. Inside Ebony's house, Kofi was busy sweeping the veranda while humming a soft tune. The rhythm of his broom matched the song of the birds resting on the mango tree outside. Every corner of the house was clean, shining under the sun, and even the flowers in the yard looked fresh. That day, Ebony was expecting a special guest, Mr. Adewale, one of the most respected businessmen in town. He owned several shops, a small hotel near the city center, and often helped with community projects. Ebony was proud that he had chosen her home for a meeting about an upcoming charity event. She had told all her friends about it, saying, "Important people know where to find me." When Kofi heard that a guest was coming, he worked even harder than usual. He wiped the furniture, polished the floor, and arranged the chairs neatly. He wanted everything to look perfect. When Ebony finally stepped out of her room, dressed in a bright yellow gown and gold earrings, the house was spotless. "Kofi," she said, glancing around, "at least you've done something right today. Make sure the juice is cold and the table is ready before my guest arrives." "Yes, cousin," Kofi said with a small bow. A short while later, a black car stopped outside. Mr. Adewale stepped out, wearing a fine white shirt and a calm smile. His presence carried quiet power, the kind that came from years of hard work and wisdom. Ebony rushed to the door, greeting him with a big smile. "Ah, Mr. Adewale. You are most welcome to my humble home," she said, though there was nothing humble about her tone. He smiled politely. "Thank you, Ebony. It's good to see you again. I appreciate your time." She led him inside, speaking in her sweetest voice. Kofi quickly brought a tray of juice and biscuits, bowing slightly as he placed it on the table. "Ah, thank you, young man," said Mr. Adewale kindly. You move with grace. Are you one of her helpers? Before Kofi could reply, Ebony laughed. Oh no, that's just my cousin from the village. He's staying here for a while. I let him help with small things to keep him busy. Kofi stayed silent, only smiling politely. Mr. Adewale, however, did not miss the tone in her voice. He glanced at Kofi again, observing his calmness, the careful way he placed the tray, and the quiet respect in his eyes. There was something about the young man that stood out, not his clothes, which were simple, but his character, which spoke louder than words. They began discussing the community event. Ebony talked quickly, trying to impress her guest. She spoke about her plans, her ideas, and how she could help. Mr. Adewale listened patiently, nodding from time to time. But as they talked, his eyes often drifted to Kofi, who quietly moved around, refilling their drinks, adjusting the curtains, and making sure the room stayed comfortable. After some time, Mr. Adewale turned to him and said, "Young man, what is your name?" "Kofi, sir," he replied softly. "You work very well, Kofi. Do you do this full-time?" Kofi shook his head. "No, sir. I'm just helping my cousin. I came to the city to look for work, but I haven't found anything yet." Ebony laughed lightly. "He says that as if cleaning is not work. He's good with brooms and buckets, but that's about it." Mr. Adewale chuckled gently, his eyes thoughtful. He said slowly, "Sometimes the one who works quietly builds the strongest foundation." Ebony didn't quite understand what he meant, but she smiled anyway. When their meeting ended, Mr. Adewale stood and said, "Thank you, Ebony. I will consider your suggestions for the event." Then he turned to Kofi. "And thank you, young man, for your service today. You are very polite and organized." Kofi bowed slightly. "It was my honor, sir." Mr. Adewale paused at the door and said, "Would you come by my hotel tomorrow morning? I might have something for you." Kofi blinked in surprise. "For me, sir?" "Yes," Mr. Adewale said with a kind smile. "Ask for me at the front desk." Ebony's mouth opened slightly. "Sir, are you serious?" "He's just a cleaner," she said before she could stop herself. Mr. Adewale looked at her calmly and replied, "Character cleans deeper than any broom can, Miss Ebony." Then he gave a small nod and walked out to his car. For a few moments, the house was silent. Ebony stood there, still surprised. She turned to Kofi and said sharply, "What did you say to him? Did you beg for a job?" Kofi shook his head. "No, cousin. I only did what you asked me to do, serve your guest." She frowned. "We'll see what he really wants. Don't get your hopes up." That night, Kofi couldn't sleep easily. He lay awake, thinking about what had happened. He had never met a man as kind as Mr. Adewale. He didn't know what the offer meant, but something in the man's eyes gave him hope. The next morning he woke up early, washed his clothes, and walked to the hotel. The building was big and clean, with shiny floors and friendly faces. He asked for Mr. Adewale, and soon the businessman appeared, smiling warmly. "Ah, Kofi. You came good," he said. "I was impressed by your manners yesterday. I need someone like you, honest, calm, and hardworking. I would like to offer you a position as an assistant here at the hotel. You will help with guests, keep records, and learn how we run things. The pay is not huge at first, but it will grow if you keep working hard." Kofi's eyes widened. For a moment he couldn't speak. "Sir, thank you. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Mr. Adewale said kindly. "I believe in rewarding good character." Kofi nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir. I will work hard, I promise." When he returned home that evening, Ebony was sitting in the living room painting her nails. She looked up and asked, "So? Did he ask you to sweep his hotel?" Kofi smiled softly. "He gave me a job, cousin. As an assistant manager. I start tomorrow." Ebony dropped her nail brush in shock. "Assistant manager? Are you joking?" "No," Kofi said gently. "He said he liked my honesty." For once, Ebony had no words. She just stared at him, her pride struggling to understand what had just happened. The man she treated like a servant had been chosen for something greater. Later that night, as Kofi packed his small bag, Ebony sat quietly in her room, thinking about what Mr. Adewale had said, "Character cleans deeper than any broom can." The words echoed in her mind again and again. In that quiet moment she realized something she had never thought about before. All her beauty, pride, and fine clothes had never earned her true respect. But Kofi's humility, the very thing she mocked, had opened a door she could never have imagined. And while Kofi slept peacefully for the first time in months, dreaming of a better future, Ebony lay awake, learning her first true lesson about the power of character and the quiet strength of humility. The months after Kofi left Ebony's house were full of quiet change in Makonda. The town still moved with its usual rhythm, traders calling out in the market, buses honking in the distance, and children chasing one another through the dusty streets. But for Ebony, the days had grown strangely empty. The house that once felt full of life and movement now seemed too quiet. There was no sound of sweeping in the morning, no gentle humming from the kitchen, and no one to greet her politely when she woke up late. At first she didn't miss him. She told herself she was happy to have her space back. She cleaned only when she felt like it and left the dishes until the next day. When neighbors asked about Kofi, she would wave her hand and say, "Oh, he's gone to chase big dreams in the city. Let's see how long that lasts." But as time passed, things started to change in ways she didn't expect. Kofi's name began to come up more and more in conversations around Makonda. People spoke of him with respect. "Have you heard about Ebony's cousin?" one woman said at the market. "The one who used to stay with her? He works at the Sunrise Hotel now. They say he's been promoted." Another added, "Yes, that young man has a good heart. I saw him the other day, he even helped an old woman carry her bags. Not many like him left." Ebony would pretend not to care, but every time she heard his name, her chest felt tight. Meanwhile, Kofi was indeed doing well. At the hotel he worked harder than ever. He treated every guest with kindness and handled every task with care. When his supervisor noticed his honesty and the way people respected him, he recommended Kofi for a promotion. Within months, Kofi became an assistant manager. He was given a neat uniform and a small apartment not far from the hotel. For Kofi, it was not about money or position, it was about purpose. He could now send money home to his mother and younger siblings. He even helped pay for his sister's school fees. Every letter from home carried blessings and pride. He often sat on his balcony at night, looking at the city lights and whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. One afternoon, while arranging papers at the hotel reception, Kofi heard laughter and turned to see Mr. Adewale walking in. "Ah, my boy," the man said proudly. "You made me proud. You see, hard work always speaks louder than words." Kofi smiled humbly. "Thank you, sir. I have only done my best." Mr. Adewale patted his shoulder. "Keep doing just that. People like you make this world better." Back in Makonda, Ebony's life was not going as smoothly. Her friends, the same ones who used to admire her clothes and laugh at her jokes, had started keeping their distance. They were tired of her pride and sharp tongue. Some of them got married or found better things to do. When Ebony tried to visit, they were often too busy. At first she thought nothing of it. But soon she noticed how quiet her evenings had become. No laughter, no visitors, no company, just her reflection in the mirror and the echo of her own sighs. Even her neighbors began to whisper about her. They said, "Ebony used to think she was better than everyone. But what does she have now? Only her fine clothes and pride." One morning, while sitting alone on her porch, Ebony saw a shiny car slow down on the street. She didn't pay much attention until she saw who was driving. It was Kofi. He was dressed in a neat blue uniform with the hotel's name embroidered on the chest. His face was calm and bright, full of quiet confidence. He stopped the car when he saw her and stepped out with a smile. "Good morning, cousin," he said warmly. Ebony was frozen for a moment. She forced a smile. "Kofi? Is that really you? You look different." He laughed gently. "Different in a good way, I hope." "Yes, yes," she said quickly, her eyes glancing at the car again. "You've done well for yourself." "By God's grace," he said. "I work at the hotel now. I came to check on Mama Decca, she's been unwell. I thought I should see if she needs help." Ebony nodded, trying to hide her surprise. The same young man she once treated like a servant was now driving his own car and helping others. Before he left, Kofi said kindly, "You should visit the hotel sometime. The garden there is beautiful. I think you'd like it." She nodded again, unable to speak much. He waved and drove away, the car disappearing down the road like a quiet dream. For the rest of the day, Ebony could not stop thinking about him. The picture of him in that uniform, standing tall and confident, replayed in her mind over and over. She remembered how she had ordered him around, how she had laughed and called him her house boy. Shame crept into her heart, heavy and real. That evening she sat on the veranda watching the sunset. The world seemed softer, quieter. The orange glow of the sun reflected in her eyes as she whispered to herself, "I was wrong about him." Days turned into weeks, and Ebony found herself changing in small ways. She began to greet her neighbors more kindly. She helped Mama Decca with errands and even started cleaning her own house properly again. She didn't do it for praise, she did it because it felt right. Sometimes she passed by the hotel and saw Kofi busy with guests, his voice calm and respectful. He always found time to wave at her and she would wave back, smiling shyly. The town began to notice the difference in her. The pride that once made her distant seemed to fade. She spoke softly now, listened more, and even smiled at people she once ignored. But late at night, when the world was quiet and the stars glowed above Makonda, she often thought of how life had taught her a lesson, not through words but through actions. Kofi's humility had built a bridge where her pride had built walls. And though she never said it aloud, she felt something deep inside, a mix of regret and gratitude. Regret for the way she had treated him, and gratitude for the way he had shown her what true strength looked like. The next time they met, it was at the market. Kofi was helping an old man load sacks of grain into a cart. Ebony watched from a distance, her heart full of quiet respect. When he turned and saw her, he smiled again, the same gentle smile that had never changed. She smiled back, this time without shame, and thought to herself, some people rise by lifting others and some fall by standing too tall. And for the first time in her life, Ebony understood that pride had made her blind, but humility had opened her eyes. The morning was bright and peaceful in Makonda. The sun rose slowly over the rooftops, casting a golden glow across the streets. Ebony stood by her window watching the busy town. For many days, her heart had felt heavy with guilt and reflection. Ever since she had seen Kofi driving past her house, she could not stop thinking about how unfairly she had treated him. The memory of his kindness, even when she had been cruel, stayed in her mind like a song she could not forget. That day she finally decided to do something she had never done before: apologize. She put on a simple dress, tied her scarf neatly, and walked to the Sunrise Hotel where Kofi worked. As she walked through the gates, she felt nervous. Her hands trembled slightly. She wondered if he would even want to see her. But deep down she knew it was the right thing to do. The hotel was quiet that morning. The flowers in the garden were fresh, and the fountain in the courtyard made a soft, calming sound. Guests moved in and out politely, and the air smelled faintly of soap and breakfast. Ebony stopped at the reception desk. "Good morning, madam," said the receptionist with a smile. "Can I help you?" "Yes, please," Ebony replied softly. "I came to see Mr. Kofi. Can you tell him Ebony is here?" The woman nodded and made a quick call. A few moments later, Kofi appeared at the far end of the hallway. He looked calm and neat in his blue uniform. When he saw her, a small smile touched his face. "Ebony," he said warmly. "What a surprise. Please come in." Ebony felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Kofi. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," he said kindly. "Come, let's sit in the garden." They walked to a quiet spot where the breeze was gentle, and the scent of flowers filled the air. Ebony sat down slowly, her eyes fixed on the ground. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of birds filled the silence. Finally, Ebony took a deep breath. "Kofi," she began, her voice low, "I came to say something I should have said long ago. I'm sorry. I treated you badly. I was proud and foolish. You came to me for help, and instead of showing kindness, I turned you into a servant." Kofi listened quietly. His face was calm, not angry, not bitter. Ebony continued, "Every time I remember the things I said to you, I feel ashamed. But when I saw you again, how you've grown, how you carry yourself with dignity, I realized something. You were never small, Kofi. I was the small one." There was silence for a few seconds. Then Kofi smiled softly. "Ebony," he said, "you do not need to carry this weight forever. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them." She looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes. "You're still so kind even after everything I did." He chuckled gently. "Kindness costs nothing, cousin," he said. "But it pays more than gold." Those simple words struck her deeply. They were soft, but they felt heavy with truth. Ebony nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "You've taught me more than I ever learned from anyone else." Kofi smiled again. "Life teaches all of us, Ebony. Some lessons are gentle, some are hard. But every lesson helps us grow." They talked for a while about home, about his new work, and about their family. Ebony noticed how calm and patient Kofi had become. His words carried wisdom she had never seen in him before. He was no longer the quiet, humble boy she had ordered around. He had grown into a man with peace in his heart. When it was time for her to leave, Ebony stood up slowly. "Thank you for seeing me, Kofi," she said. He nodded. "You are always welcome, cousin." She smiled faintly. "Maybe one day you'll come to my house again, not as a helper but as a guest." "I would like that," Kofi said kindly. As she walked home, Ebony felt lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. The sun was high now, warm and bright, and the town seemed more beautiful than ever before. Every face she saw, every voice she heard, reminded her of something Kofi had said: kindness costs nothing, but it pays more than gold. That evening, Ebony sat by her window again. She thought about her past, about the pride that had once ruled her heart. She realized how much it had taken from her: friends, peace, and happiness. But now she understood that change was possible even for someone like her. From that day on, Ebony changed in small but steady ways. She began to greet her neighbors with real warmth. She helped Mama Decca with her errands and sometimes cooked food for children who lived nearby. When people dropped something in the market, she bent to help them pick it up, something the old Ebony would never have done. At first, people were surprised. Some whispered, "Is that really Ebony? The proud one?" But as weeks went by, they began to see that her kindness was genuine. One afternoon, a young girl from down the street came running to her. "Auntie Ebony," she said cheerfully, "you are so nice now. My mama says you are a new person." Ebony laughed softly. "Tell your mama she's right," she said. Life felt different now. Simpler. Lighter. She no longer needed people's praise to feel important. What mattered to her was peace of heart, something she had learned by watching Kofi live with grace, even in hardship. Months later, Kofi came to visit Makanda again. This time he came as a guest, just as Ebony had promised. She welcomed him with a smile and served him food herself. As they sat together, she told him about how her life had changed. "I've learned that pride builds walls," she said quietly, "but kindness builds bridges." Kofi nodded. "And now you are crossing those bridges, Ebony." They both laughed gently. From that time on, Ebony continued to live differently. She became known in Makanda not for her beauty or pride, but for her kindness. She joined a small group that helped feed the poor. She even started teaching young girls about respect and humility. Whenever anyone asked her why she had changed so much, she would smile softly and say, "I once turned a man into a maid, and he turned me into a better person." Her words spread through the town, carried from mouth to mouth, and soon everyone in Makanda knew the story of Ebony and her cousin Kofi, a story not of shame but of change. Years later, when Kofi became the hotel manager, people would tell new workers about him, how he began with a broom and rose with grace. And when Ebony visited him, they would see the respect between them, built not on pride or wealth, but on understanding and forgiveness. Every time Ebony saw him smile, she felt thankful for the lesson life had given her. She had once thought power came from pride, but now she knew the truth: power came from kindness. And though many things changed in Makanda over the years, new shops, new faces, new roads, one thing remained the same. When people spoke of Ebony, they said, "She was once proud, but now she is good." And Ebony, sitting under the evening sun, would smile and whisper softly, "Thank you, Kofi. You cleaned more than my house, you cleaned my heart."